There is a house in Kent that we have visited before. It was the first film we ever made about a building on this channel. A 34-minute documentary about 1,000 acres of Elizabethan deer park, about 400 rooms under 7 acres of roofs, about the stolen royal furniture in the state apartments, about the Sackville family and the Whitehall Palace pieces still stamped with the initials WP. And if you watch that film, you may remember that it ended with one figure it did not fully cover. A woman born in the house in 1892 who could not inherit it because she was a woman. A woman who loved Knole more than anyone else alive in the 20th century. A woman who would be written into literary history by Virginia Woolf in a novel called Orlando that Woolf's own son described as the longest and most charming love letter in literature. Her name was Vita Sackville-West. This is the film about her. Vita's presence at Knole is documented, recorded in ink on paper 450 years after the Sackvilles first took possession of the house, in a series of diaries, letters, notebooks, and novels that she kept and wrote and published across a 70-year literary career. Her story is not a simple story of loss. It is a story about a woman who loved a building that the law forbade her to own, who was courted by the most famous novelist of her generation because of that loss, who lost the house anyway, and who then spent the rest of her life building a garden at a ruined Kent castle 30 miles to the south, a garden which is today one of the most visited gardens in England, and which she built, very deliberately, as a consolation and a revenge. This is the story of a woman, a house she could not have, and the love letter in the shape of a novel that her own lover wrote to give the house back to her in fiction. Knole, which we covered in our first film, is one of the largest private houses in England, a 400-room medieval and Jacobean palace on a ridge above Sevenoaks, set in a 1,000-acre deer park that has been continuously grazed since the 15th century, built by an archbishop of Canterbury in 1456. Seized by Henry VIII in 1538, given to the Sackville family by Elizabeth I in 1566, filled with stolen royal furniture by the 6th Earl of Dorset in the 1690s, passed down through 13 generations of the same family. Handed to the National Trust in 1946, with the family retaining private apartments. The house Vita Sackville-West was born in, loved beyond reason, and was not permitted to inherit. The law that prevented her is called the male entail. Under the Knole settlement, as it had been established in the early 18th century, the house and the Sackville barony could pass only to a male heir of the body. Vita was the only child of the 3rd Baron Sackville. She was a daughter. Therefore, on her father's death, the house and the title would pass not to her, but to her male cousin, whichever male cousin was closest in the line of descent. In her case, it would be her father's brother, her uncle Charles, who would become 4th Baron Sackville in 1928. After Charles, it would be Charles's son, her cousin Eddie, whom Vita barely knew, and who would eventually become the 5th Baron. Vita knew this from childhood. She knew it at the age of 6. She knew it at the age of 16, when she first wrote in her diary that she would never, in her entire life, own the only house that would ever matter to her. She knew it on the day her father died in 1928, and she stood in the Great Hall and watched her Uncle Charles walk through the door as master of the building. She had spent the previous 36 years at Knole in the certain knowledge that she would lose it. She lost it. That is the structure of her life. That is the shape this film has to tell. They walk the deer park. They pay for a ticket in the Green Court. They photograph the painted plaster ceilings in the state apartments. They pause in the cartoon gallery where the Raphael tapestries hang in reproduction. They buy jam in the brewhouse cafe. And almost none of them know that the woman born in the bedroom above the Poets Parlour in March 1892 loved this building with the kind of absolute ferocious love that English literature has, in the 20th century, made famous precisely because of how unbearable its consequence turned out to be. Vita Sackville-West is one of the most written about literary figures of the 20th century. She is the subject of 7 biographies. She is in every serious account of Bloomsbury. She is in every history of English gardening. She is the author of a handful of novels, many volumes of poetry, a pioneering gardening column for The Observer that ran for 15 years, and a travel book about her journeys in Persia that still sells. She is also, in the quiet way that English literary reputations become quiet, a footnote in the reputation of her more famous lovers. Virginia Woolf is a giant. Harold Nicolson is a minor giant. Violet Trefusis is a curiosity. Vita herself, the woman whose loss of Knole started everything, has become the figure they all orbited around. This film returns her to the centre. If you find these deep investigations into Britain's great houses and the hidden lives of the women who built and lost them worth your time, please subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment telling me which estate we should explore next, and help these stories reach the audience they deserve. It begins in a bedroom above the Poets Parlour. Victoria Mary Sackville-West was born on the 9th of March 1892 in a first-floor bedroom of Knole to Lionel Sackville-West, son of the heir to the barony, and his wife Victoria, a woman with a complicated personal history which would in due course shape everything about her daughter's upbringing. Vita's mother, Victoria, was herself the illegitimate daughter of the second Baron Sackville and a Spanish flamenco dancer called Pepita, who had been the Baron's mistress in the 1860s and 1870s, and by whom he had 5 illegitimate children. When the second Baron Sackville died in 1888, his nephew, also named Lionel, inherited the title and the house. The illegitimate Pepita children were left out. However, in a family arrangement that was partly a guilt payment and partly an astute political manoeuvre, the new Lord Sackville's son, another Lionel, Vita's future father, was persuaded to marry his first cousin Victoria, the eldest illegitimate Pepita daughter. This kept the Pepita line connected to Knole. It also meant that Vita, born in 1892, was the double great-granddaughter of the second Baron Sackville on both sides. She was cousin and child of the same house. Lady Sackville, Vita's mother, was by every account a woman of brilliant social charm and increasing mental instability. She had her own Sackville scandal in 1913, when she was successfully named in a will contest over the £1.5 million fortune of her longest-standing admirer, the art connoisseur Sir John Murray Scott, whose family tried and failed to have the will overturned on the grounds of undue influence. Lady Sackville had also managed, between 1898 and 1912, to conduct a sequence of very public romantic friendships with other prominent men, including Rudyard Kipling, the architect Edwin Lutyens, and the American financier J.P. Morgan, all while remaining married, technically, to Vita's increasingly withdrawn father. Vita grew up in a household in which her mother's emotional life filled most of the available oxygen. She grew up in the biggest private house in Kent, largely alone. Knole became her sibling. It was, throughout her childhood, the only thing she could talk to in the evenings after her governesses had gone to bed. She walked the deer park. She memorized the rooms. She wrote down, at the age of 14, a catalogue of the pieces of royal furniture stolen by the 6th Earl of Dorset, 347 objects, with dates, stamps, provenance, and the bedroom in which each piece now stood. Her description of the house, in a 1907 diary entry, is the single most comprehensive inventory in private hands of Knole's staterooms in the early 20th century. It was written when she was 15. In March 1913, at the age of 21, Vita married Harold Nicolson. Harold was a young diplomat, Oxford-educated, Turkey-born, witty, gentle, disorganized in his finances, and almost perfectly unsuited to Vita's particular combination of aristocratic self-certainty and imaginative ambition. They were, very clearly, not in love in the conventional sense. They were friends of extraordinary depth. They shared a literary ambition. They understood each other's sexual nature almost immediately. And within 18 months of the wedding, both of them had begun, quietly and without significant deception, to take lovers of their own sex. Harold's affairs were mostly, though not entirely, with men. Vita's were entirely with women. The marriage survived, all of them. In 54 years of marriage, from 1913 to Vita's death in 1962, the Nicolsons maintained what their son Nigel would eventually, in his 1973 book Portrait of a Marriage, describe as the happiest unconventional marriage in 20th century English letters. They had two sons, Benedict, born 1914, and Nigel, born 1917. They corresponded every day they were apart. They lived, eventually, at Sissinghurst Castle, and they spent almost none of the first 10 years of their marriage talking, publicly or privately, about the single greatest passion of Vita's inner life, which was Violet. Violet Keppel Trefusis was the daughter, which is historically extraordinary, of Alice Keppel, the long-time mistress of King Edward VII. She had known Vita since childhood. They had been at school together. They had made a pact, age 14, to love each other always. They had almost certainly become physical lovers before either of them married in the summer of 1910 at Knole. Both of them, for reasons of social necessity, married men. Violet married Dennis Trefusis, a cavalry officer, in 1919. Vita, already married to Harold, regarded Violet's wedding day as a personal bereavement. Between October 1918 and February 1921, Vita and Violet conducted one of the most conspicuous lesbian love affairs of interwar English society. They travelled together to Paris, to Monte Carlo, to the Italian coast. Vita dressed, for weeks at a time, in men's clothing and called herself Julian. They spent a period of 6 weeks in Amiens in the winter of 1920, during which they appeared to have been planning to elope permanently to Europe and not to return. It was only the combined efforts of Harold Nicolson and Dennis Trefusis who flew to Amiens in a hired aircraft on the 14th of February 1920 to bring their wives home. That ended the elopement. The aftermath was enormous. The Nicolsons' marriage nearly ended. The Trefusis marriage effectively ended. Violet was cut off by her mother Alice for the rest of Edward VII's mistress's life. Vita, who wrote an extraordinary 1920 confessional manuscript about the affair, which was not published until 1973, 18 years after her own death, carried Violet as an imaginative weight for the rest of her life. She also carried, by 1921, the certainty that she could not live in London. Vita and Harold bought Long Barn, a small 15th century cottage at Sevenoaks Weald, in 1915. It was 2 miles from Knole. From 1915 to 1930, Long Barn was where Vita was, in practice, when she was not at Knole. It was where she wrote her early novels. It was where she met, in December 1922, at a London dinner party at Clive and Vanessa Bell's house, a 40-year-old novelist and essayist named Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf had by the winter of 1922 already published 3 novels. She was, at 40, in the middle of the most productive decade of her working life. She had founded, with her husband Leonard, the Hogarth Press. She was the central literary figure of the Bloomsbury set. She had been in and out of severe mental illness since her teens. And she was, within 3 weeks of meeting Vita, writing in her diary that Vita was a woman who lounges about the house in breeches with a deep voice, and what she suffers from is the Knole look. I cannot see her for half an hour without my heart going. The affair between Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville-West ran for approximately 4 years, from late 1925 to 1928, with physical intensity, particularly during the first 2 years. It was also, more importantly for literary history, the longest working artistic collaboration between them. Vita published the Edwardians with the Hogarth Press in 1930. the biggest commercial success of Woolf's publishing house. Woolf published, in October 1928, her sixth novel. It was called Orlando, a biography. Its dedication read, "To V. Sackville-West." Its subject, very thinly disguised, was Vita herself, her family, and above all, her house. Orlando is the story of a young aristocrat who is born in a great English house in 1588, becomes the lover of Queen Elizabeth I, serves as English ambassador to the Ottoman Empire in the 1690s, mysteriously changes sex to become a woman in Constantinople, returns to England in the 18th century, lives through the Romantic and Victorian periods, and is still living, now clearly as a 20th century English country gentlewoman who inherits her ancestral house on the day the novel was published, the 11th of October, 1928. The house in the novel, which is not named but is described in physical detail no reader of Knole could mistake, has exactly 365 rooms, 52 staircases, 7 courtyards, and 12 entrances. The heroine is in possession of it through a centuries-long life. The inheritance question in the world of the novel is solved by what the novel does not explicitly say, but what it very visibly performs. That the owner of the house, legally, is a woman. Orlando was Woolf's 1928 birthday present to Vita. Vita's son, Nigel Nicolson, who spent most of his adult life writing about this peculiar literary event, would call it the longest and most charming love letter in literature. But it was more than a love letter. It was a legal argument. It was an imaginative repair of the entail that had dispossessed Vita in real life. In the world of Orlando, the woman who loved Knole got to own it. In the world outside the novel, Vita's father, Lionel, had died 8 months before Orlando was published, on the 28th of January 1928, and Knole had passed to her uncle Charles. She had lost the house in January. Woolf had given it back to her in October. In a book, Vita read Orlando straight through in a single evening at Longbarn. The copy Woolf sent her is in the Binecker Library at Yale today, with Vita's annotations in pencil in the margins. In the back of the book, on the final blank page, Vita wrote in her own hand the only sentence she ever wrote in response to the novel. "Darling, I am so exceedingly grateful." That is the shape of this story. What Vita did next is what you do when a novel has given you back, in fiction, a house you cannot have in law. She bought a different house. In April 1930, 18 months after Orlando appeared, Vita bought Sissinghurst Castle, a ruined 16th century manor house in the middle of a rough Kent farm near Cranbrook, or 30 miles south of Knole, for £1,275. Sissinghurst had been an Elizabethan hunting lodge, a Tudor courtyard house, a prison for French naval captives during the 7 Years' War, an agricultural labourers' workhouse in the 19th century, and a derelict set of ruins by the 1920s. It had, in 1930, no running water, no electricity, 2 habitable rooms, and a tower that Vita fell in love with from the car on her first sight of the property. She bought it on the spot. She moved Harold and the 2 sons into a ruined cottage while the main work on the towers began. She spent the next 3 decades, with Harold's collaboration and by her own direct labour, turning the farmyard and ruins of Sissinghurst into one of the most famous gardens in English history, Sissinghurst Castle. Garden is Vita's true reply to the loss of Knole. It is not, architecturally, a great country house. It never was, but what she and Harold built around it, 10 distinct outdoor rooms, each enclosed within walls or clipped yew, each planted to a different colour, palette, or botanical theme, each linked by clipped vistas, is one of the most imitated garden plans in the English-speaking world. The White Garden, laid out in 1949 and 1950, has been copied, by conservative estimate, more than 500 times worldwide. The Rose Garden, the Cottage Garden, the Herb Garden, the Orchard, the Nuttery, the Yew Walk, the Moat Walk, Each of these is both a distinct garden space and a kind of reference point in 20th century English horticulture. Gardeners come to Sissinghurst from Japan, from the American South, from Australia, from South Africa. Vita died at Sissinghurst on the 2nd of June 1962, aged 70, of cancer. Harold survived her by 6 years and died at Sissinghurst in 1968. Their son, Nigel, the younger of the two, inherited the house. In 1967, in order to secure its long-term survival, he gave Sissinghurst to the National Trust in one of the earliest modern major gifts to the Trust of a post-1900 built property. The Nicolson family retained residential rights to a wing. The Trust took over the garden. Sissinghurst receives approximately 200,000 visitors a year. It is the most visited garden in the National Trust estate. Vita had lost Knole. She had built, in 30 years of planting, a consolation that outgrew it. But the Knole that had given Vita her loss and the Sissinghurst that she had made her reply were not kept running by the woman whose name is on both of their public histories. Their presence at Sissinghurst and at Knole under Vita's tenure is documented, recorded in ink on paper in the household accounts of both houses, held at the Kent Archives at Maidstone. Their stories are not. There was a head gardener at Sissinghurst called Sidney Neave, who began work for the Nicholsons in 1935 when Vita was just turning the moat corner of the ruined castle into what would become the Rose Garden. He was 32. He had trained at Hever. He stayed with the Nicholsons for 31 years, effectively running Sissinghurst's horticultural operation from the day Vita laid out the plan until his retirement in 1966. He was paid, in 1938, £3 and 10 shillings a week. He was paid, in 1965, £15 a week. He is named in Vita's Observer columns 4 times, always as the head gardener, but never by name. His daughter Mary still lives in Cranbrook. There was a housekeeper at Knole during Vita's childhood called Charlotte Watson, who had been in service to the Sackvilles since 1878 and who managed the indoor staff of approximately 50 under Vita's father, the 3rd Baron. She had, on the afternoon of the 9th of March 1892, been the woman who lifted the newborn Vita out of her cradle and into her mother's arms. She retired in 1920. She died in 1931 at a cottage in Sevenoaks that Vita paid for. Her name appears in Vita's unpublished juvenilia 9 times. She is buried in an unmarked grave at St. Nicholas, Sevenoaks. There was a village postman at Sissinghurst called Harry Baker, who delivered Vita and Harold's correspondence for 23 years, from 1938 to 1961, and who is named in the unpublished Nicolson household diary as our indispensable Harry on approximately 34 occasions. He retired in 1961. He died in 1973. His son, still alive in Cranbrook at the time of this recording, possesses the leather postbag that carried, among other things, Virginia Woolf's letters to Vita on almost every Monday of the 1930s. They appear in the records as footnotes, a name beside a sum, a household entry, a pension slip, and then they vanish into the silence that swallows everyone in a great house or a great garden who is not a member of the family that owns it. We do not know their faces. We do not know how they saw the family they served. We know only that they were there, that the garden they kept is still flowering, and that their names survived. Some of them, because the Nicolsons kept their accounts and nobody threw them away. Vita wrote the garden. Other men and women grew it. The house and the garden absorbed both. Stand in the White Garden at Sissinghurst on a June afternoon. Stand in the White Garden at Sissinghurst on a June afternoon, with the climbing rose Madame Alfred Carrière in flower on the wall, and the regal lilies opening in the bed behind you, and a cool wind from the east coming over the Weald of Kent. And you see what every serious gardener for 70 years has come to see, an enclosed geometric garden in 4 panels, all plant material in shades of white, silver and green. The single most influential monochromatic planting in 20th century English horticulture, but look closer and the picture complicates. The garden was laid out by Vita and Harold Nicolson between 1949 and 1950. Vita and Harold were lovers of other people. The garden was designed during the same decade in which Vita was writing about her lost childhood at Knole, her lost affair with Violet Trefusis, and her lost lover, Virginia Woolf, who had walked into the River Ouse with stones in her pockets in March 1941. The White Garden is the quiet, still product of a sequence of losses. The whole garden, read attentively, is a memorial. Vita's life is not one life. It is the record, in gardens and books and letters and one very famous novel, of what a woman in 20th century England could make when she could not, by law, inherit the thing she loved. She wanted Knole. The entail gave it to her uncle. She wanted Violet. Society would not permit the elopement. She wanted Virginia Woolf. Suicide took Woolf from her in 1941. She wanted a garden of her own. Sissinghurst gave it to her and gave it in due course to the nation. She wanted her work to outlast her. Orlando has outlasted her. The houses and the writers and the husband and the lovers and the gardens gave her, in the end, all of what she had wanted except the one thing she had wanted first, which was the house she had been born in, that she never got. Knole was given to the National Trust in 1946, 4 years before Vita died, with her cousin Eddie retaining a private wing. She went to the opening ceremony and wrote in her diary that it was the strangest day of my life to give a house I could not own, because what Vita's life has also always preserved, in the letters and the household books and the unpublished manuscripts, is the names of the Sidney Nevers and the Charlotte Watsons and the Harry Bakers, without whom no garden could have grown at Sissinghurst, no novel could have been delivered by post from Virginia Woolf at Rodmell, and no child could have been lifted from her cradle at Knole. Vita wrote the words. The women and men around her made the words possible. Vita Sackville-West asked the same question that all great houses ask, but with a particularly modernist sharpness that no other 20th century English writer quite matches. Who does a house belong to? The family whose name is over its door, the daughter born in its principal bedroom who loved it beyond measure and was not legally permitted to have it, the English law of male entail which decided otherwise, the novelist whose love letter in the form of a novel gave the house back to the daughter in fiction, the garden 30 miles south that the daughter built as consolation, and as something larger than consolation, the 200,000 visitors who walk Sissinghurst's paths every summer, or the land itself, the Kent Weald, the Greensand Ridge, that was there before any Sackville was made Earl of Dorset, and will be there long after the last climbing rose has finished. Knole does not answer. The house never answers. And nor, in her own quiet way, did Vita. She simply planted, and she wrote, and she kept her diary, and she placed one more bulb in the ground, and in 1962 she died at Sissinghurst with the names of her dogs in her last note, and she gave everyone in the end the answer she had spent her life preparing, which was a garden, and a book, and a record of a love that 20th century England had not been able to accommodate, but had not been able to prevent either. And at Knole, in the great chamber where Vita played as a child, there is still a small oak panel on the south wall beside the fireplace, which, if you know where to look, carries Vita's initials VSW, faintly incised into the grain. She carved them there, by her own account, on an afternoon in the summer of 1907. She was 15. The panel has not been replaced. The initials are still there. She is still in there. She always will be. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see a writer or a house differently, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me which estate, writer, or hidden history we should investigate next. There are hundreds of these stories waiting to be told, and every one of them is hiding something beneath the surface.